everybody, I'm KC, and welcome to an edition of Let's Talk About. Today, let's talk about the My Little Pony movie. Yeah, I know, I'm getting to this kind of late, even though I saw it the week it came out. I'm sorry, I've been busy. Anyway, after years of anticipation, excitement, praying it wouldn't turn out like the G1 movie, and bugging the writers about if your favorite character was going to be in it, the My Little Pony movie finally hit theaters last month. And we're finally going to talk about it and see how well the pastel ponies we've known and loved for the past 7 years do on the big screen. But first, a few quick disclaimers. If it's not obvious at this point, I am a fan of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. So I saw this movie through the eyes of a fan, and that's the opinion you are going to hear. And this is a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, go see it if you still can. Now let's actually talk about the movie, for real this time. The story revolves around Twilight Sparkle putting together a friendship festival in Canterlot, but the festival was interrupted by the forces of a ruthless conqueror known as the Storm King, led by Tempest Shadow. Tempest then petrifies the other 3 princesses in crystal and conquers Canterlot, causing the main 6 to flee Equestria in under 2 minutes. Well, you can't say it doesn't get straight to the point. So the main 6 travel to find someone who can help them overthrow the Storm King and save Equestria. As far as the story goes, it's pretty straightforward. It's a traditional plot for these TV to movie adaptations, nothing particularly challenging. But like a lot of other adventures in Friendship is Magic, it may be a typical concept, but it's the execution that makes it stand out. When I heard that this movie was going to be about the main 6 having to travel outside of Equestria and meeting all sorts of new creatures, I was really excited. The magical world of Equestria and beyond, and how much grander and more thought out it felt compared to previous pony incarnations, was one of the big draws of the show for a lot of people, including myself. Expanding on the lore and society of this world is a very common request from fans, and I think the writers knew that when they were deciding what to do with this movie. As far as expanding this world, it really doesn't disappoint. While it seems like they couldn't go as deeply into the trials and tribulations of these species as much as it feels like they might have wanted to, it paints an interesting picture. They do hint and sometimes even get to go into a lot of the struggles these areas have faced. It really contrasts with the utopia-esque society Equestria seems to be, and they even comment on that. In fact, if you could describe them all in one word, it would be oppressed. The Storm King has apparently already conquered their lands, and each of them wound up with new struggles. Some fled their homeland to find a safe one, some were forced into servitude, and some just try to get by as well as they can. It's a really good way to go about presenting these new lands while still keeping them all connected and relevant to the plot. And despite bouncing around from one location to another, the story moves at a pretty steady pace. It's not perfect pacing by any stretch. I personally would have liked to have spent more time with the pirates, but none of the locations managed to overstay their welcome and get enough screen time and connection to the main 6 to make it memorable enough to want to see more of it. It also helps that Tempest is always right on their tails trying to capture them, so the girls always have a reason to keep moving. As far as the characters are concerned, I think the movie did a good job of reintroducing the main 6 to the audience. I know there were people who went into this movie who didn't know who these characters were, and one of the challenges of an established TV show jumping to the big screen is making sure anyone who isn't familiar with the show knows what's going on. And I think the movie did well at saying, this is where we are, this is what's going on, this is who these ponies are. And let's be honest, as much as we all talk about the depth of these girls, and they do have layers to them, their basic characteristics are not hard to get a grasp on. While none of them go through any kind of character arcs, except for Twilight, their first outing on the big screen was a great one in my book, especially Pinkie. Turning up Pinkie's antics could be a red flag sometimes, but as far as I'm concerned, this is one of her most fun appearances. I got a real kick out of her scenes. But that doesn't make up for the lack of Fluttershy. Seriously, I know there are a lot of characters in this movie, which meant some of them were going to be pushed to the sidelines, but did it have to be Fluttershy? And I know Discord couldn't be in this movie because he could have solved this whole problem instantly, but that doesn't mean I didn't miss him. Oh, wait, there he is. But on the other hand, I did appreciate that they included Spike on the journey. Whenever the big adventures come along, the show tends to find whatever reason it can to keep Spike out of it, so I appreciate that this time he at least got to tag along. And even if the main 6 don't get equal screen time, they each do at least get a chance to shine in one way or another, especially with the new characters. Except for Starlight, who doesn't get to go. I'm assuming that's because the movie was written before she became a main cast member, so it's really not a big deal. But Starlight is still in the movie, right here, and right there. Yep, that's about it. But with so many characters, whose story is it? It's Twilight's. While MLP is very much an ensemble show, the show started and mostly revolves around Twilight, and ever since she became a princess, the stakes have gotten higher for her. And I think this movie is the farthest Twilight herself has been pushed so far. Once Tempest conquers Canterlot and presumably Equestria, she is solely focused on getting something that can stop them, while the rest of the main six are doing their thing and making friends with the new cast. Twilight makes a lot of questionable choices in this movie, and I feel like people are going to be very critical of that. So let's take a closer look at Twilight's downfall. Towards the end of the second act, Twilight tries to steal an artifact that she thinks can help them save Equestria. When her friends rightfully call her out for this, she lashes out at Pinkie and lets all of her fears be known. This scene really surprised me as I watched it unfold, mostly because I'm pretty sure the only other time the girls have had a fight like this was when they were brainwashed to be the worst of themselves, but also because it's a direction that they've never taken with Twilight before. Being so terrified that she might fail, she completely forgets what made her succeed in the past. Let's go over what happened again, shall we? A powerful army crashes into Canterlot, the rest of the princesses are incapacitated, which I know isn't a new thing, but let's just pretend it's shocking. She's wandering unfamiliar territory with little to no information to guide her, and has the very pony who encased the other princesses on her tail, and who she only escaped because of the noble sacrifice of a beloved wool-eyed mare. Sorry, just a second. Twilight's been pushed to the limit before, but that's usually by pushing her own abilities or separating her from her friends. But here, all of her friends are with her, and yet she still thinks she has to do this alone. She's so terrified of letting every pony down that she's forgetting just how powerful kindness and friendship is. Does this justify her actions? Not really, no. Is it out of character? I'm going to say no. Really, she's just scared and overwhelmed. Twilight has always felt a sense of duty and responsibility since day one, and she's put a lot of her own self-worth in her princess position ever since she sprouted those wings. I wasn't surprised this fight was happening because it was out of place. I was surprised this was something they hadn't tackled before. And let's remember, this is a pony who doesn't handle stress well. This is all resolved rather well in the climax, but we'll get to that later. Let's get to the new characters. While the new characters don't get a ton of depth, with one major exception, they are an interesting and entertaining group. There's Capper, the anthropomorphic cat thing, who, I'm not gonna lie, I was the most nervous about. I don't know, is it just me, or does his design not quite fit with the others? I think he might be too humanized, and that's what's throwing me off, but maybe that's just me. But it turns out, as soon as this cool cat stepped into the scene, he immediately had my attention. I love this guy. I love his swag, I love his con man personality, and Taye Diggs' Capper is one of the best things ever. He's just cool, I love him. Maybe it's also because Capper was so different than I thought he was going to be from what I saw in the trailers. He seemed like some long-lost hero to me, but no. He's a pathetic swindler just trying to scrape by, even trying to sell the ponies off to clear some debt he owes. He's our first example of how tough the civilizations outside of Equestria have it because of the Storm King's reign. And he's the first of many characters in this movie to be swept away in the girl's kindness and generosity. Especially generosity, since Rarity seems to take a real liking to him. Maybe it's because she has a cat of her own, who knows. I did not expect to come out of this movie loving Capper as much as I did. I'm still not 100% sold on the design, possibly because we have seen domesticated cats in this world, but he's still such a delightful character and definitely the most fun of the new group. I don't know, maybe he's just so charming that I look past my concerns, or maybe it's connected to my childhood obsession with another silver-tongued con cat. Anyway, the pirates. Now, the pirates are probably the biggest example to me of a really great idea that just didn't get the time to go as deep as I think the creative team wanted. When we first meet Captain Solano and her crew, they are forced labor for the Storm King. Yeah, a group of pirates who are probably the most free and wild spirits you can think of are doing routine shipping work for a tyrannical warlord. This was a pretty compelling idea, and for a minute or so, you feel their oppression. But then Rainbow Dash just tells them to be awesome, and boom! Pirates again. Sure, throw away the forced shackles of a ruthless and powerful dictator. Why didn't they think of that before? Oh yeah, because 2 minutes after they did that, their ship is tracked down and blown out of the sky for insubordination. It's not bad, but the pirates are definitely the most underdeveloped of the new characters. There might be more about them in one of those prequel comics that I haven't read yet, but as far as the movie goes, I do wish they got a couple of minutes reminiscing on their past adventures, or how trapped they feel, or something, before they turned around and decided to embrace who they really were. But their designs are cool and a lot more fitting, so there is that. But my big question is, can they fly? I mean, they're birds, but they don't have proper wings. I'm just wondering. But moving on to the big ones, the species we've been waiting for years now, the hippogriffs. I'm sure people are still spamming Silver Quill's inbox about that. Now it turns out they're not hippogriffs anymore, they're sea ponies. What a completely original idea that fans haven't been begging to see return from a previous generation. The sea ponies were probably the most hyped up part of this movie, mostly because of their infamous G1 counterparts. But while a lot of the stuff in this movie was not what I expected, the sea ponies were probably the biggest surprise to me. The G1 sea ponies became so popular because they were absolutely ridiculous. They pop up out of nowhere, sing their annoyingly catchy song, and then disappear. Their absurdity was hilarious, and I think people wanted to see how that bizarre species would translate to a show of much better quality. And what we got was a species that was driven from their home and forced into hiding. The hippogriff story of transforming themselves into sea ponies to hide themselves away is one of the most interesting things in the movie. And the designs went from lazy and kind of creepy to absolutely gorgeous. Visually, the sea pony scenes are probably the best in the movie, which is probably why it was played up so much in the film's marketing. Though not a single shooby-doo was uttered, so, -1 for bogusness. And can you believe we finally have a good queen in MLP? Sure, Queen Nova is strict, but she does what she believes is best for her people, trying to keep things peaceful. This doesn't erase the stigma of princess good, queen evil that the show has to keep enforcing, but it's a step in the right direction. And I really loved Princess Skystar. If being voiced by the living embodiment of sunshine, Kristen Chenoweth, wasn't enough, she's excitable and adorable and, for lack of a better word, bubbly. Well, I really like how they had her excited to see the main six and grew attached to them because she was so lonely in her very detached kingdom. I really don't have anything deep to say about her. She was just so cute and cheery, and I loved her. The only character I didn't really care for was Grubber. We all talk about those characters in animated movies that are put in for the sole purpose of comic relief. That's what Grubber is. And that's all he is. Besides eating and saying unfunny lines, I don't think he even does anything to forward the plot or contribute any kind of actions towards the story at all. By the end, he completely disappears from the movie. The MLP crew did a wonderful job of keeping to the spirit of the show on the big screen, but this was the only time I felt like they were pandering. It would explain why Grubber is in the trailer so much. Pinky's already the perfect amount of comic relief. We don't need this pig badger thing. And I personally thought the Storm King was underwhelming. I mean, he's pretty funny, he's got an incredible design, and Liev Schreiber nails the voice work, but after so much build-up, he just turns out to be a silly, reckless power grubber. I mean, I guess that's the point, but I don't know, it didn't really work for me. Especially after seeing his path of destruction and having him be the major threat in the climax of the movie, it was just harder to take him seriously. He's not bad, just not great. But I can forgive all of that because without him, we wouldn't have Tempest. Here's the thing. I knew Tempest was going to be a big part of this movie. In fact, I think Tempest was scientifically designed by the filmmakers to be a character that fans would instantly latch onto. Well, that's exactly what happened. Even before the movie came out, fan art of Tempest spread throughout the community, and once the movie finally did come out, her following multiplied, to the point that Equestria Daily had to remove her from a poll on the most popular movie character because she was dominating the chart at an insane level. But while Tempest has a lot of what other popular characters in this series have had, what makes her stand out to me is what's unique to her. Going back to her design, while she has the perfect darker color scheme and sharper edges to her physique that fits perfectly in any Hot Topic, the most obvious thing about her is her broken horn. Maybe it's because so many OCs out there have done that over the years, but I didn't realize until I saw the girls' reaction to her just how unusual that was. It adds an air of mystery to her, wondering what could have caused that to happen, and it even affects her magic. She can still use it, but it's mostly in sporadic bursts. So instead she relies on artificial forms of magic, like the petrifying crystal ball things. She also has a different demeanor. She's very cold and calculating, imposing with her actions and not her words. I know this is a very common kind of villain in animation, but when you really think about it, it's pretty unusual for the series. Except for maybe Starlight, most of the villains in MLP have been bombastic, boastful, and very loud, even the secondary villains. But Tempest is much more stoic and commanding, which makes moments where she does take action or lose her cool all the more terrifying. It's very effective. But Tempest's biggest character drive is losing her horn, which, quite honestly, I didn't expect him to address. I just thought it was there to make her look cool. But we learn more about Tempest when... Oh, please. Is this going where I think it is? Please tell me we're getting...
It's time you learned a lesson. It's time that you understand.
Sorry, but as soon as I heard Emily Blunt was cast in this part, I was hoping we'd get an amazing villain song. And even when it is explained, it wasn't a wound from a great battle or something. It was an accident. She just walked into an Ursa Minor's den and it lashed out, giving her that scar and a broken horn. That alone would be enough to scar a pony inside and out, but what changes Tempest for the worse is how her friends abandon her. Instead of trying to help their friend through the biggest struggle she's probably ever faced, they go off and play with a pony who can do what they can. And I think this is more tragic than people may think. This poor pony's life was changed in an instant. I'd imagine a unicorn with a broken horn is similar to Scootaloo not being able to fly. It's akin to a handicap, but instead of having her friends help her work around her new limitation that they sort of caused, by the way, they ostracize her and play with a normal unicorn, whether out of fear or ignorance or whatever, which does happen. Sometimes people just aren't willing to help or understand someone, and it's easy to see how someone would turn cold towards the world when their so-called friends desert them because of something they can't control. Everything about Tempest's character adds up once you realize this. The whole reason she's helping the Storm King is because he says he can restore her horn. Even after all this time, she's desperate to be just a regular unicorn again. I think deep down, she thinks she can't find her true strength without that. That's a pretty strong backstory and motivation for a movie like this. I knew I was going to love Tempest going into this. I just didn't expect her to be such a strong character outside of looking really cool. On the technical side of things, the first thing anyone mentions when talking about this movie is the animation. But can you blame them? Well, I know Flash is a very helpful and creative tool for animation that DHX has worked wonders with. There's no denying just how much smoother everything moves when going back to 2D animation. I was a bit nervous with the change in style though. Maybe it's because the characters are a lot rounder, but there was something about the new designs that I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get over. But once I saw them move, I was sold. It was just so vibrant and fluid and expressive, and it's just nice to see a 2D animated movie on the big screen again. While there were moments where the animation was a bit wonky and stilted, that's to be expected when the crew's basically rebuilding everything from scratch. And the camera! Did anyone else notice how smooth the panning and tracking shots were in this movie? I mean, just look at that. Even the CGI used for the airship and certain backgrounds looked a lot better here than they did in the trailer. It's still not great, but it's integrated well enough. And as I've said before, while it can be used well, CG never blends perfectly with 2D animated worlds and characters. In fact, I can count the amount of traditionally animated movies with seamless CGI added to them on one finger. The songs were all amazing as well. One of my favorite things about MLP is the music. Heck, hearing This Day Aria for the first time is pretty much the moment that turned me into a brony. So hearing Tony caliber singers perform such great songs with a much bigger orchestra, making everything feel much grander than the show, was such a treat for me. Frankly, I've listened to these songs more times than I care to admit. And man, who knew Gamora could sing?
The melody is pleasant.
And speaking of the songs, the voice acting is magnificent in this movie. Obviously, the main cast from the show are just as charismatic and endearing as they have been for the past 7 years, but the celebrity guest stars were really impressive. When you get a celebrity to be in an animated movie, sometimes it can be tough to separate the voice from the actor and believe it's the characters. That is a form of acting that they aren't used to. But this felt natural, they all turned in excellent performances, and with a couple of exceptions, if you hadn't told me who was voicing the characters, I wouldn't have noticed they were celebrities. Especially Liev Schreiber as the Storm King. He was just so great. So, after all of that, overall, My Little Pony the movie is a fun adventure movie. A pretty typical product as far as these TV to movie adaptations go, and nothing mind-blowing as far as theatrical animation goes, but I think anyone going into this movie expecting to have a good time is going to get their money's worth. And it does have that extra bit of defying expectations that G4 has become known for. Particularly with Twilight and Tempest, being pushed a bit farther than most of their characters to reinforce the theme of the series of embracing friendship wherever you can find it. Even in the toughest of times, you might just find a better place and a solution to your toughest challenges. A message Twilight's friends help her remember, and one she passes on to Tempest. It's been well debated if Tempest's horn should have been restored after she helped save the day, but I think that goes against her revelation as a character. Once Twilight realized what Tempest had been through, she metaphorically metaphorically and literally, reached out to her after everything she's done and offers her friendship exactly the way she is, while the Storm King used Tempest's insecurity to manipulate her into thinking he could fix her. Tempest's desire to have her horn restored was her downfall, and she's just as strong and capable without it. She just learned to work around her limitation, which is a great message to push. It's another unique reformation arc. And I know some people are sick of the reform villains, but that's a subject for another day. This movie embraces what made MLP so endearing to so many in the first place, and production-wise, it cranked everything up a notch or two. Best of the series? Not really. Structurally, there are episodes of the show that are better than this movie, but I had fun seeing it, and I do think it's a good animated movie. That does not seem to be the attitude of the critics, however. I mean, come on. 45% on Rotten Tomatoes? That's not even close to almost any other movie in its category, and it's really not much different from these. I mean, I realize it's competing with the many other wonderful animated movies this year, like, oh jeez, oh come on. Well, at least there was Lego Batman. Look, I don't want to turn this into Suicide Squad 2.0. If you judge this movie on its own merits and still didn't like it, that's fine. I can see people not getting into this movie, and I respect your judgment if you gave it a shot, even if you didn't like it. And I've seen written in video reviews from people who aren't bronies who had a perfectly good time with this movie. But just reading through these, it seems like a lot of these were judging My Little Pony as a brand and not as a movie in its own right. Which I know is very easy to do. We've all been there. Heck, 5 years ago, I was that person. But to me, some of these were just ridiculous. I read a review that said this was worse than the Emoji Movie. Seriously? I really thought the show had a big enough impact on pop culture that we were somewhat past the stigma, but apparently not. Maybe I'm not seeing something through the rose-colored glasses, but while I don't think this is going to sway anyone to join the herd, if you find yourself seeing this movie and you leave your grievances and reluctances at the door, you might have a good time in a colorful world that tries to embrace and practice ideals that could stand to be tried more often. Especially in the particularly dry well of good animated movies we've gotten this year, this to me is definitely one of the better ones. As a fan, I went in expecting to go on a grand adventure with characters I love and would grow to love, and that's exactly what I got. And I just wrote a 5,000 word review on what I enjoyed and didn't about this movie, so hopefully it's enough to express whether or not this movie works. For me, it was a wonderful way to celebrate how much I have embraced loving My Little Pony Friendship is Magic as a piece of entertainment in its own right. Whew, glad that's done. Now all that's left is the season 7 finale. With how gigantic this movie turned out to be, it'll probably be a softball episode.
What? What has happened?
It worked! We brought you back!
I just... Wow. Okay, well, we'll talk about that another time. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.